this is Rumor, and today I wanted to look at a wee portion of the Alleyman's Tarot that I briefly showed in one of my recent videos. I received it in March, and it is quite the extensive deck. This is the cigar box that you could also get for it, because at that point I was like, well, why not? And actually, because the Kickstarter project was so successful, it raised so much money that Seven, its creator, was actually able to offer a lot of the extra items very affordably, including the deck itself. So I just kind of went nuts and got everything. But just to show really quickly here, here's some of the extra bits you can get, token and coin. The deck itself with all of the expansion packs that I also ordered. Quite substantial. Every card is different. They come from all different decks. So this would certainly be a very fun one to walk through someday. I just think it's so enormous that I can't even fathom sitting and going through the whole thing right now. But for now, though, what I wanted to go over was one of the more striking features of the deck. The original Alleyman's Tarot deck has 9 different death cards, and the expansion packs usher in an additional 4, so you get lucky 13 all in. Now, Seven has included explanations for each of them in their guidebook, so as you can see, in the headings, you have in parentheses, for example, stubborn, rebirth, fire. So these are different interpretations of death that all stem from the core traditional meaning, but can give it a different tone or even level of severity, if you will. So what I thought I would do to start out is just go through each of these cards with their guidebook meaning, and then do a selection of the ones that I find myself a bit more partial to, and are the ones that I think I will probably realistically use in the deck. I am definitely, I can say at this point, game to incorporate multiple death cards in the deck. I think it's really cool to have more than one, and I'm totally on board with this idea that they all have something a little different to offer. I just don't know that I want to include 13 of them, as appropriate as 13 is, though. But without further ado, as we saw in the guidebook, this first death is considered the stubborn death. It was made by Brianna Taylor, and there is Brianna's contact information on social media. Things change a lot, so I make a habit of collecting deaths to represent the changes in life. So many narratives of people trying to overcome death. This death isn't change, it's the opposite. It's the desire to stay as things are, the stagnant death of change itself. When you get this, you need to take stock of what you've reanimated or kept from dying. Sometimes we need to recognize that all our labor to keep things from changing, growing, moving is wasted. It'll end eventually. Is it worth the life you have left to give your years up to something else? Sometimes it is, but it's the question this card asks. In reverse, this card is just horror. You're desperate, hungry for this thing that should, by all rights, be dead many times over. You have a deep problem that you only let be filled by this. It's unhealthy and dangerous. Therapy is needed, not as a joke. So I'm not doing first impressions here because I have already looked through this deck, but as far as the stubborn death goes, my first response to it, I recall being the same as I kind of feel towards it now. It's like I like it, but it just also makes me feel uncomfortable. And not that that's a bad thing in tarot. I think it's good if like an image is going to be confronting. It's like seeing that scalpel and the syringe, and it just sort of looks like a mad doctor somehow. I like the gravestones and the hint of a skull there, but I don't know. It's not like readily an image that resonates with me, although that idea of the stubborn death is interesting. I think, though, that's usually how I would interpret death just in a regular deck if it were to come up reversed, because I do often read with reversals. Not every time, but a lot of the time. I will read reversals, and that's how I tend to see a reverse death as that resistance to change. So I might be tempted to just use that instead of adding this extra card because, I don't know. Aesthetically, I like the monochromatic look of it, but I don't know. Not really vibing with that. Second death. The death of rebirth. The death card often is symbolic of an ending, and where there is an ending, there is also a new beginning. The Grim Reaper, known to be a symbol of the death of something that is no longer serving us in our lives. The curved scythe forms an incomplete circle, indicating that death does not mean an end, and that a new beginning is waiting. Death is responsible for the ashes of the eagle, but it is the eagle's choice to be reborn from it. All the same, you have the power to make that decision to keep going, to rise up again from your own ashes. Things don't end so easily. In reverse, this kind of change is patiently waiting for some time now for your action. This is ashes gone quite cold, but recognize that this is not an end either. You can still come back, try again, but you need to want it. So far, you haven't. Why? And as you can see here, this death was made by Manya H. You can find Manya there. I'm assuming, I don't know if that's Twitter, Instagram handle. So this death, just as far as my own personal reactions, I think this artwork is beautiful. The coloration, I love the curvature of that scythe and having that bird's skull at the end of it instead of a blade, and then just seeing that eagle resurrecting. I've always loved the concept of the phoenix, rising from the ash, and there's something about this blue sky and watery background too that's really lovely. It doesn't make this feel like, even though it's the Grim Reaper depicted here, it doesn't feel like a gloom and doom death. I feel like it evokes that sense of hope that can come through rebirth, transitioning through the change and emerging from it better and stronger somehow. And whenever I see water, I think intuition, and where you just know in your gut that that's what's right, and you're going with the flow of life. It's like the cycle that happens when this water evaporates into the sky and then rains back down from those clouds. So I do like this one. It's a contender. The next death, quite dramatic. Look at that coloration. Very darkly beautiful. This is the fire death. It's such a Lord of the Rings Mordor vibe. This one is from me. This must be Seven's own work. Don't know how he got it, and by he, I can only assume Seven is referring to the Alleyman. Interesting. How does the Alleyman come across his cards? My understanding is that he just collects these as he finds them and compiles it all and wrote up this notebook with his insights and observations of the cards. So this whole Alleyman persona that underlies this deck is just another aspect of it that makes it so cool. This whole fictional character that you can just sense behind the curation of these different cards, and with Seven pretending these are their own post-it notes, just to add a little addendum to each one, but it's the Alleyman's writing. The desolation. Change comes to all, but this death leaves nothing behind. You will not just be letting something go to move on. Something will be burnt away. There is no going back. You may remember the husk of what's left, but it cannot be used again. Approximating it to start anew can be done, but it is most often folly. This does not have to hurt. It just means that when it happens, you can't return to how things were. Suck it up, bud. You can clear the ashes and start over. If you are a glutton for punishment, make it the same way. If you feel like you want to learn from this, make it out of things that can't burn down. I'd suggest stone. If you do reverses, this is the death of intentional malice. You cry at the ashes of what has been destroyed, but it was your own match. Guilt. But you wanted it to burn, didn't you? Ooh, ouch, taking accountability there. I like this. I just feel like it gives me a tower feeling, doesn't it? I mean, with the literal tower in the background of the card, too. I don't know. This idea of everything like being burnt away, it just gives me that sense of the tower with things crumbling down and like needing to rebuild with a stronger foundation. So I think on that basis alone, I might exclude this card, as cool as the artwork on it is. I don't have to run with this interpretation either. I do realize that I could come up with my own thing, but I don't know. I'm thinking like maybe not, but we'll see. So here we have a historical death characterized by blood. From the Metropolitan's Italian sheet. This is change that hurts. You will bleed. There will be pain. At its kindest, the pain will be minor, maybe just mental and emotional rather than physical, or all three. This is also the one that has little ambiguity. It just hurts. The pain almost always comes from someone or somewhere else. This is not you hurting yourself, not you stressing out over nothing, but the world kicking you when you're down. Take care in knowing that you survive this. The death of blood takes its price and moves on. If you feel that it lasts forever, at that point you have to recognize your own complicity in the pain, an inability to move on. If you do reverses, this one is chastising you for letting things hurt so badly when they don't need to. You did this to yourself, in effect. Is it really as bad as you've come to think of it? Take a deep breath and reassess your life. Ooh, another death, definitely asking for accountability. I like the validation, though, that's mentioned earlier as far as like, oh, this isn't just pain in your own head. Yeah, it hurts. It's real, but you're going to get through this. You're going to survive it. So I like that. I don't like that it's change that hurts, but I certainly understand that. Going through a bit of change like that myself at the moment. And so I don't know. We'll see. I kind of like that it's the death of blood. I'm assuming just because of that streak of red that's on the scythe blade there. So I don't know. It's kind of neat. Okay, this one's cool. Motel Death. This one is by Lost Vegas. That's clever. This is where you can find Lost Vegas. Change is only rarely as dramatic as all this. No, most change is a motel on the side of a highway. It's normal, it's small, it's standard, we forget it. Sometimes it's in the mundane changes of day-to-day life that we find the biggest growth, movement. The motel death in a reading reminds us that every day, even in the smallest ways, our lives are always changing, and that's beautiful. We can't hold on to anything too close. Sometimes good friends become acquaintances. Everything breathes, moves, becomes different, sometimes in shape, form, sometimes in our own thoughts, in our memories. We're here for a good time, not a long time. That's beautiful. If you do reverses, this more than any death is a sign that you are not ready for life. You feel afraid that not a single thing, person, item stays. Nothing gets to remain in the end. You must find peace here. So that's a kind of cool way to come at it. I do love this stay for a good time, not a long time. Sort of a more casual acceptance of death. When it talks about it being like a smaller death, something like standard and more mundane, that makes me think more of like a minor arcana interpretation. But I do see, though, how it works. Because even things that are small can still be big. It doesn't have to be something that like is soul crushing and as painful as the blood death. It's not a frightening death. I feel like this is the kind that you are able to take more in stride. So then we have, look how cute that is. This is the Dancing Death. How sweet. I love that. And it accessorizes so well. Very pretty. This one is from L'Oracle des Dames. Copyright the BNF. I don't know what that means, and some of you might, so forgive my ignorance. Things move and change and die. Yes, sometimes literally die. This is not a death to do with change as much as how we live in the change. This card is so simple. It just wants you to be happy. Dance on the grave of what ends in your life. You lived it. If we could dance in the ashes of our loved ones, we should. Oh, the celebrations of letting things be finite. This is your reminder to dance in the face of change, in the face of death. You are gorgeous when you do. In reverse, this card is apathetic grief, a numbness to the pain of loss or change. This is a perfectly fair way to feel pain, but also know it will be followed by that pain eventually. Acting aloof from your pain does not deny its existence, it just hides it. Huh. Well, I gotta say, I really love this one. I think this is my favorite death so far. I love this idea of dancing in the ashes, because as I am really learning right now, in the wake of loss, life does move on, and you can choose to wallow in the sadness, or you can choose to embrace the joy and the memories and the happiness that lies ahead and the new memories that you can create with those who remain. And it really does become a choice at that point. And so I feel like this version gives me some guidance on how to look at it a different way and just try to keep my head up and keep laughing, keep dancing. It's not always going to feel like that. Of course, grief rears its head, and there's going to be the sorrow, and there's going to be other factors in life that cause that. There's going to be other changes and loss ahead. But to make life worth continuing, to retain its meaning, you gotta dance. Or do as best as you can. So I like that very much. Ooh, this is a pretty one. Another historical death card, characterized as the riding death in the guidebook. And it is from Le Tarot de Charles VI. Oh, the graves. This is a sweeping death, a change that leaves nothing untouched. It passes over you like a wave, and you are left holding nothing. This is the tower, really, isn't it? Sudden, massive change. Or, more rarely, large-scale death. But let's not dwell there. I don't need to tell you how to read the tower, this massive, sweeping upheaval of life. Things change dramatically, and you must either be ready to rebuild or to move on, else you'll be stuck in grief. In reverse, the riding death is an omen. Things could change at any time, any of it. It's not a reminder to not get too attached, but it is a reminder to love what you have while you have it. Nothing is guaranteed in life, not a single thing. Appreciate the beauty of living because it ends, not in spite of it. It helps, I promise. That's a nice note to end on. And while I'm thinking of it, I just wanted to say, they do offer the reverse meanings here, and though I do often read with reversals, I feel like the Alleyman's Tarot is a deck I would not read with reversals, because I think when you're laying a spread, basically, and you can have this kind of variation in the images, they are all from different decks, different artists. I feel like even when I have a deck that's cohesive in style, it can still throw me sometimes to see the reversed image. I still like to play on that, because sometimes the reversal gives it a positioning that makes it appear differently in relation to another card in a meaningful way, at least as far as I intuitively perceive it. But I just feel like a deck like this, where you're going to have a lot going on, that it would really, really disrupt things more for me visually. So I think that for my mind, which can get very scattered very easily, it will be easier for me to just deal with upright meanings. And I think that for this card specifically, having this kind of variety to choose from that can show up at the same time as you lay out a full spread, I think you're already getting some upright and shadow meanings inherently in that, even if they're all upright. So in any case, that's just my aside, that I think that I probably would not read with reversals in this deck, but I will continue to read them from the guidebook as I go through. But what I thought was interesting here is, just after I said that this card was giving me tower feelings, 7 is outright saying that this one is the tower. Again, I don't know how I feel about having a death card to mean the tower, because the tower means the tower, and the tower is in this deck. But what I do like about this card, and why I think I probably would still include it, is that it's making me think of the Lenormand meaning of the scythe being that swift cut, that swift ending. And I think that that is an interesting element to bring in, this idea of like rapid, swift change. I would try to keep its interpretation a bit more distinct from the tower, though. It'd be interesting if they showed up in a reading together. That would really be dramatic. Okay, we got another oldie. And again, it's another one I just... I often do like the Marseille-style deaths. I don't really like this one, though. I don't know. This is me just being a snot as far as, like, actual aesthetics go. I just don't care for it, and I have a choice, so I don't have to include it if I don't want to. But this is Death, Sowing. This is the one most likely to mean literal death of all of them. If that is what you receive, I'm sorry. In other cases, it speaks of ending things to let them seed. Our bodies feed the earth. Let whatever is ending, changing in your life, become seeds for your future. Sometimes this must mean you take up the scythe yourself to cut down the crops, to end things early, but know that you must do so thinking of the future, not just of the ending now. The bodies will heal the ground, sustain the creatures. There will be more bodies. Make your plans in the same way. When you prepare to cut one down, have another prepared to rise. The energy you gain back from letting something go will let you thrive in a new something. In reverse, I see bodies raining back from the ground. You are reminded of all the things you cut down and never made peace with, never prepared for, never moved on from. Take your time. It tends to be a lot. And this is Death from the Solesio Piedemontes. Not sure that I pronounced that correctly, but there you go. Oh, and it looks like the Alleyman spilled something there. Okay, so one thing that struck me with this, being that I'm not caring for the card aesthetically and kind of wanting to leave it out of my deck, there was mentioned in here something of, oh, have another prepared to rise, and just that sense of rising. If you're sowing seeds that will grow, I feel like that could be captured in this more phoenix take on death, with that sense of rebirth and rising from the ashes. And so if I don't include this in the deck, I feel like that concept could still come across in that card. So that's my little justification anyway. Oh, another old-timey one. Okay, this is Death with a Shovel. Okay. Caitlin Jeffrey. Very nice, Caitlin. I do like that death better than the other one, but I don't know. Sometimes coming to peace with change is realizing that change needn't have happened, that something wasn't truly done just yet. When that happens, you take up your shovel and dig that corpse back up. At its best, this is recognizing an error and trying to make right. This is giving space to something you didn't give proper space to before. At its worst, this is nostalgia. This is coming back to something and deciding not to let go. This is rarely as dangerous as the stubborn death, but recognize when it's time to put the thing back. That's it. In reverse, this old wound you draw from the ground, is it worth it? Why bring up the past when it's so dead and gone? Take time to meditate on how this old wound still aches and hurts you and everyone else. Stitch it up before you put it away. Trauma won't feed the ground. It will just fester. Ew. So similar to the stubborn death, I guess, but more about a sense of regretting a change that you yourself initiated. So where you want to go and just the thing that you let go, you go and dig it back up. And that could be for good reason or without good reason. I know that there's another card in here that can relate to this idea of resisting change. And I'm just going to break my order here and go right to it because I'm thinking of it now. This number 13 is actually called the Undead. So the pastel colors and the reverse position of death going back to the left versus where you often see it going facing right in the Rider-Waite-Smith, like going towards the future. And this one looks like it's done an about face and is turning around, and it even has a skeleton horse. That's kind of cool. But the soft glow of just almost like a sun back there, and the way the breeze is blowing the flag and tendrils of Death's hair. I don't know. You almost feel something more positive about it, but I'm just going to look up Seven's interpretation before I go further with that. This came from one of the expansion packs. The Undead was made by Brenda Ho for the Adventurer's Tarot. And there's Brenda's info. I've rolled dice in my life. I get this thing here. The undead are fodder, typically. Abominations, anti-nature, and low-level foes. Minions. I really can't see undeath in this respect as anything but the marching of the thing that should have ended or changed. Perhaps beautiful, truly, but still wrong. This is the thing you could not face or let go of. Now your foe is before you and eternally waiting for you to face it. Skeletons guard a tomb forever, never having any other goal. To put it to rest, you have to go there. It will not come for you. This might be hard. You'll face difficult memories, but you have to end it eventually. Maybe take friends along to make it easier. That's nice advice. In reverse, this card is the glorious march of the old, nostalgia at its peak, letting the dead out of their tombs for a lap around the block in a lovely parade. So long as you put it back when you're done, it works. So that was why this one just came to mind, because it seemed like kind of a lighter perspective on undoing change or resisting the change. But obviously the upright meaning that was given in the guidebook is not looking at it in a favorable light either. But I just like the artwork of this card better. So I feel like it's a stubborn, and then this one with the shovel, like in place of those two, I would probably throw this one in and just gauge whether I see that as a light or dark thing. So yeah. Anyway, I'm going to put this back off to the side. Sorry to skip out of line there. I'll go back to the death cards that were included with the original Alleyman's deck. So the first 9 are the ones that I've gone through here. So the Undead that I just pulled came from the expansion pack, as did these remaining 3. Okay. So then to start with the expansion death, this cute question mark death, I don't know, it's a bunny skeleton. Ooh, it kind of creeps me out. And this one was made by Myloney Cat for the Bunny Tarot. And there's info. Okay, one day I was walking down the street in a college town, Iowa City, suburbs, mostly on my own. Then I saw a rabbit. I smiled, dunno, just like rabbits. Then it turned and faced me with its other eye, or where it used to be. What was left was a pus-filled and open wound. Somehow it stared at me with that eyeless hole. Death in a literal sense is part of everything. Under our skin is meat and bones. Anything you see on the surface is how society functions. There's a meat under there that can be exposed under change, carnage, brutality, and the inevitable death. What I'm trying to say is that even the cutest shit is really fucked up. This is a more literal death card, a call to note how change is really just a sort of decay of our bodies. Meditate on how the loveliest thing can rot. In reverse, you don't need those nightmares. Horrific acceptance of skin and flesh and bones. Okay. Yeah. I respect it. I respect that. I am just kind of creeped out by the whole thing, so I don't know. I don't think I could face this bunny in my deck. So I'm making kind of a snap decision that it probably wouldn't be included, but I see where it's coming from, and obviously having to stare down that literal truth of death, I think I managed to do that enough anyway. I think I take that away from any death card that I might see, and I don't think I need an eyeless bunny skeleton to be the reminder of that. So I'm just going to, I'm going to skip on that one. Okay, last two. Oh, I have to say, I love this one. Oh God, it rips my heart out. I love it though. I feel this card, which is the Mourning Death. Made by Hynuli for the Wandering Spirit Tarot. And apologies if I mispronounced that name. No better card speaks to the grieving of losing something. Sometimes change is hard and it hurts. It leaves us sobbing, alone, and feeling like nothing will ever be as it was. That is this death, the Mourning Death. What many fail to see is that this mourning comes about from the feeling of protection. We are protective of our lives, and the things we lose feel like failures on our part to keep them around, even if it was their time to go. So we cling to what we lost, now a shell of what it was. But it's been cold in our arms the whole time. We just didn't want to look down. Let go. It's okay. In reverse, this is literally carrying the corpse of something along with you, being utterly unable to let this change happen. Everyone around you sees you carrying it and turns away. You aren't a martyr. What you lost did not destroy you, and you will survive. Go. Join the living. I really hope that in reverse, this doesn't literally mean carrying the corpse of something. Not to make light of such an otherwise beautiful description and card. This one obviously hits me pretty powerfully right now. If you've seen my previous videos and you know that I am in the midst of grieving a recent loss in my family, and I am finding those moments where you just kind of don't know when it's going to come up, when the emotions will overtake, and it's like it happens when you don't think it would, and when you think it would, it doesn't. It's really weird, and it's been interesting navigating that. But one big lesson that I have been learning through this, though, is just trying not to cling too hard. Embrace, yes, embrace what was amazing and beautiful about that person and the relationship that we had. I don't ever want to let go of that. But at the same time, it's finding this acceptance that it's a situation that couldn't have gone on. You know, it was a natural death. It was the passing of someone who did live a long and great life. And we were able to say our goodbyes. We were able to be there at the passing. And by we, I mean my mom, my siblings, and I. It really couldn't have been more perfect. And it really gave a sense of closure that could be much needed in those situations. When I think of if it had gone any differently, how I might be having a harder time. And I am having a hard time. Don't get me wrong. I'm not making light of it whatsoever. But I think that there was just so much divine timing and grace involved in the way everything played out. I can't not feel so blessed and at peace with what's happened. It doesn't make the loss any easier, but it does fill me with a serenity at the times when I really need it. And of course, I don't always feel that way. Oftentimes, it feels like this. But I move through this, and I'm able to return to this. And so, you know, it's just taking it day by day and working through. And I'm not going to live through this experience feeling any sense of regret. I think what ifs are inevitable, but I know that it's just something we automatically want to do to ourselves, and it's not necessary. You know, it's a process. I don't pretend to have it figured out. I'm still learning. And I'm learning that it's not going to go away, but that it will get better somehow, some way, and that it's all going to happen in its own time. And so, yes, trying not to be too stubborn about it, be too resistant, and just learn these lessons of letting go and going with the flow and just celebrating what was. Okay, let's just get to the final death card here. Obviously, I have a theme this month, don't I? Okay, this one's very cool. I love this one. The Smoking Death. Brought to us by Micah Ulrich, using the back of the Flux Arcana with another of Micah's designs called the House of the Rising Sun on front. Yeah, that's a good match. I like that. Okay. So, I know that smoking came and went and now people vape. Same shit. It embodies perfectly the cycles of change that we implement, sometimes to our own detriment. The way that what we do has an impact on when things end. I just really love the poetry there. I know, trite, cliche. It's still true. This death is the one that speaks about how we make small changes in strange ways every day. There are things we do that we know if we go too far, they can't be taken back, but we do them anyway. In the moment, we always see it as the lesser of two evils, as an accruing debt we may never pay simply because we forget about it or don't want to think about it, but it's still counting each day. In reverse, this is just outright self-destruction, a belief that what we do doesn't matter because we all die in the end, but never realizing that the consequences often catch up to us before we do kick the bucket. Yikes. Okay, I have to geek out for a second because, as some of you may or may not know, I am a huge Buffy fan, and accordingly, I'm also a big Angel fan. And when I read a belief that what we do doesn't matter, for anyone who's seen Angel, I can't help but think of Angel saying, if what we do doesn't matter, then all that matters is what we do, or something to that effect. It's always so dramatic. And I like the concept of this death, just kind of getting into the small changes that we make day by day. And I guess if you're thinking of like smoking, I mean, that's cigarette by cigarette leading to possible health consequences of that over time. So I don't know if I'm getting it exactly in the way that Seven's intending it, but I'm kind of seeing it as like an opposite of this swift cutting death. This is the one that is slow over time. That's how I would probably interpret it anyway. And I think it's how I will interpret it because it is definitely going in my deck. Because now I've gone through all 13 of them, and I think that indeed, because of this card, I think I would like to use this and the context that it falls within to embody the messages of this stubborn death and then this death with the shovel, where it's like wanting to dig back up the corpse because you regret the change. So I think at that, I like this idea of the cycle and rebirth, and I think that idea, hopefully I'm not getting these mixed up, but I feel like, was this the Sowing death that had that idea of laying the seeds? And so then whatever grows can rise again. And so I feel like, purely because I like the artwork better, and I also just like that imagery of, well, it's an eagle, not a phoenix, but we know what they're getting at. I would choose this one over this one. Not that they're exactly the same. I get it. The interpretations are nuanced, at least as far as the interpretations that were given. I could give it more nuanced interpretation as well, but just because it's my deck and I like to look at cards that I think are pretty, I'm going with my choices here. This one I feel like, it feels like too much of a tower card to me. I think the image is cool, but like, I don't need to have it in the deck, and because I get such a strong tower feeling from it, I think that would be my reasoning for keeping that in. Whereas this one, even though it was given a tower-like interpretation in the guidebook, I would just see it as more of like a, swift cutting death and not necessarily in exactly the same sense as the tower. I think I made my thoughts on the bunny clear. This one, change always hurts to me. I don't feel like I need this extra card in there to remind me of that necessarily. Because when I'm thinking of how it hurts me, it is often in this sense of just grieving the change. And this just feels a lot more powerful to me and speaks to the pain of loss and change. This I just think is cool. I feel like I would want to keep it in and just give it a go and see how it ends up playing out in a reading. And that just looks cool. I just like the look of it. So I'm keeping that one in. I don't know. I just think it's nice to have something in to kind of lighten it a bit, that it doesn't have to be like something that is like, oh, ripping my heart out type of change. I like the more carefree feeling of, all right, everything's temporary. And so we just got to kind of roll with this. And obviously, I like the lightheartedness of this. I think this is adorable. I like its little outfit. I like that it encourages a more positive feeling, because honestly, this experience that I've been going through, it's been the root of so many beautiful moments that I've had with family, with friends, all the people that turned out in support. It was just overwhelming, and we had so much laughter. Yeah, there's a lot to celebrate. As much as we grieve, we celebrate too, and we just feel so lucky, and we have such fun memories to look back on, and we all have a sense of humor and try to take things in stride, and that's usually our way of getting through, is a lot of times laughing at ourselves. It's not a denial of the change, of the loss that has happened. It's just using a positive mindset. When I relocated to London in the United Kingdom almost 14 years ago, I moved for my husband's job. We had just gotten married, and he had an opportunity over there. I did not go willingly at first, no. I'll be perfectly honest. I resisted the crap out of it. I was stubborn death. But whatever, it was the change I needed to make, and I did, and it hurt though, and I ended up going into a depression consequently, because it was just a lot of change at once. Completely changing countries, just missing my family and friends so much, missing my job, and it was a real disruption to my career. And most of all, though, it was just missing the relationships that I left behind in the States, which, subsequently, luckily, I ended up in flexible work that allowed me to travel back and forth a lot. So I really have gotten to spend arguably more time with my family this way than if I had stayed. Because if I had stayed, you kind of get caught up in your day-to-day, whereas when I visited here, I stay under my parents' roof. And I visit for weeks, if not months. And so we've had really great quality of time. So it ended up like working out fine, and I was able to find balance and everything. But in that first year or two, though, when I was just feeling blank, and it was a whole new identity crisis, like probably it felt bigger than when I was an adolescent, honestly. And just this reinvention of self, and just really not knowing who I was anymore, because the things that defined me, or I thought defined me, weren't around me anymore, and I just kind of had to pick up from scratch. But in any case, long story short, what got me through that was shifting my mindset, because I was very much sinking, or had well sunk into, a victim mentality, where I felt like everything had happened to me, and like I had no choice in the matter. And ultimately I had to accept, like, well, hey, I did not have to move. That would have had other consequences potentially for my relationship. I don't know what that other scenario would have been, but I did choose to go, and I needed to accept accountability for that, and then just make the most of the situation, because, oh, poor me having to live in London, frickin' England. And like I said, I was able to make it work out with still having quality time with family and friends back home. And my work path led me into new and interesting directions. And so it all worked out. So now I don't have any regrets. But what was pivotal was just learning how to dance on the ashes of my old life. And I think that the growth that I encountered was far more substantial than anything I would have had if I had just stayed in the same spot where I was in my comfort zone. I learned so much about myself. I don't feel like a completely different person. I'm the same at the core, but I have changed in so many ways for the positive, and life has just taken on so much meaning. I just really feel like the expansiveness of my perspectives really gave me a great appreciation of everything. A lot that I had already appreciated, but I just really felt it even more deeply. And my spirituality really just expanded and deepened. And I think I said I was going to make a long story short, and I'm sorry that I have not. But getting to the point, I decided my happiness wasn't anyone else's responsibility. It was mine. And I needed to choose to be happy. And by that, I didn't mean slap a smile on my face if I'm feeling unhappy and just keep saying, I'm fine, if I'm really not fine. No, I do not mean that. I just mean accepting accountability for the choices that I did make. And as far as what fell outside of my control, making the most of it and seeing what new opportunities were opened to me and just shifting it that way and choosing happiness. It really made all the difference. It took time, but it changed everything for the better. And I feel like it prepped me for what I'm going through now. I think what I went through then was a type of grief for sure. And I feel like maybe if I hadn't gone through that, I would be sinking much farther than I am right now. Again, this is not easy. I'm not trying to make light of it, but I'm saying that it's not taking me down. I'm not drowning in my grief. I got my head up and I'm moving on day to day. Yeah, sometimes I cry and just can't believe that any of this is real. And I feel heartache, and it can come on so overwhelmingly strong at times, but I just always know when it happens that I'm going to come out on the other side. I can trust in that. And I credit a lot to that previous experience and just the new mental habits that I had adopted at that time for just adjusting my outlook and counting blessings instead of dwelling on the negatives. And it just really rewired my brain and has made things just so much better. It just makes life so much more pleasant, if not easier. Just, it helps you keep perspective. Anyways, I've gone on about that long enough, but I really love this card, and so it's for sure going to stay. And let's see here. The last death I'll keep in here is this one, which I am choosing to interpret as the slow change that can happen gradually, little by little. So we've got some contrasts here. So I can see how some of these kind of mirror each other. The swift death counterbalanced by the slow death. The mourning death offset by this dancing death. And then we've got this idea of the cycle and coming full circle. In death there is rebirth, but then there's also this resistance to that, going against that current and not completing that cycle. And then this, I don't know, just kind of a wild card death where death goes. I feel like this one, I'm really just going to see how it comes up in a spread to really home in on how I would interpret it. But in the meantime, I like that idea of it being kind of like normal day-to-day change. Yeah, we'll just see how that goes. So as of now, these are my picks. These are 7 deaths to all go into my Alleyman's Tarot deck when I decide to finally read from it. In future, maybe I will go through what some of my other choices were. There was no other card in the deck that had as many different options as this. So if I do it, it may go a bit faster next time. And if anyone's interested, I can try to showcase more of the deck too. And I will definitely report back with what my experience is reading with it as a working deck. Or you know what, if I just realize it's just a fun collector's deck, I may not do anything more with it than just flip through it sometime and appreciate it for the massive labor of love that it clearly was, the amazing collaboration that this would have required to procure all these different cards from all these different decks, or to have them created specially for this deck and all the merchandise that went with it. It's really cool. So, all right, I will leave it at that. I think I've had enough dwelling on death for the moment. I hope you found this interesting though. I think this just kind of celebrates like how there's all these different interpretations of the same card and they all have a little something different to say as a result. And so what Seven's trying here is by including all of them and seeing which ones may come up in a reading can shine a different light. Of course you can do that with a single death card. Of course, there's so much nuance to a single tarot card and a single tarot deck. And whether you're reading with reversals or not, context says everything. So I mean, for sure, this is not essential to do a reading and get all of these different layers of meanings. That's something that your intuition can unearth instead. But I think it's just fun though to try actually having a representation of different sides of death. And it's definitely a cause for contemplation, if anything. It doesn't have to have anything to do with actually reading the tarot, but just pondering this subject of death, if we want to look at it as literal death or as change in whatever incarnation it could arise. We all face it. It is the one inevitability, and it happens over and over and over again in many different ways. I could have certainly gone even deeper with every card, but that really would have taken forever, and your time is too valuable. So how about I end this long goodbye now? But it's just goodbye for now. I will be back with something. I don't know what, but I hope you are doing well in the meantime, and thank you so much for watching and sticking this out if you're still here. Bye.